Two, one. All right, all right. Welcome to the podcast, Miss Denise LeHeup.
Thank you.
Someone I've just met a couple months ago and have learned a lot from, and I'm excited to work with you in a lot of different things, projects that we have. But
Great.
welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me, Ronnie.
Awesome. Well, tell me a little bit about you. How did you get started in real estate?
So I got started in real estate by flipping houses, and that was the number one reason why I got my real estate license. I felt like I could use those commission dollars towards helping me purchase homes that I and a business partner were flipping.
Great. And as you know, you started off on the investment side. So how did you go from real estate investor Denise
Yeah.
to let's say broker Denise?
Yeah, well, that's been a long road traveled. But, I think I just got bitten by the real estate bug. It was something that I got really interested in during the time when I was flipping houses. And then, those house flipping markets come and go. And when that market went, I had enjoyed real estate so much. I said, well, instead of going back to some other type of job, how about I just, see if I can be a decent realtor? And so I got into actually being a real estate professional.
That's fantastic. That's really cool that you started off in that profession, a different kind of mindset going into real estate professional. So from real estate professional realtor, now you're a broker who owns multiple offices. So how did that kind of happen?
So after my times being acting as a realtor and helping other families, buy homes and sell homes, I decided to go into management. And so I managed for a local real estate company here in Central Florida. And then Keller Williams came into our market area, and I got approached by the owner of the franchise license to manage one of his offices. And so I first started out as a team leader.
Okay.
And I grew the market center, and then the downturn of 2008 came, and the owner of the franchises came to all of his team leaders and said, I'm not going to ride this market down. You have the opportunity to buy your franchise plus one more, and so I bought the original office that I managed, which was the office in downtown Orlando called Keller Williams at the Parks, and I bought the Heritage office here in Altamont Springs.
Nice.
Yeah.
So definitely an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Definitely have a business mindset.
Sure.
Cool. And on the podcast, I talk to a lot of business owners and I kind of see where they got their start. I've never, everyone that I've interviewed are self-made people that kind of like heard from the bottom, hustled really hard and made it. That's really inspiring to a lot of Americans that maybe have their own business and they're thinking like, is this going to be worth it? And I would say it is.
Oh yeah. I think being an entrepreneur, there's nothing like it.
Yeah. And a lot of people also may not be built for it.
Well, that's true too, or they may be built for something else besides real estate. But you need to find out what you're good at and then pursue that.
Yeah, a lot of people sometimes, people I've met or, even myself, I had to examine myself and say, listen, am I built for the stress?
Yeah.
Am I built for the sales mentality? Am I built for the longevity of it?
Right.
And I think it's a good opportunity that, we have here in America. Well, talking about those opportunities, real estate, right? That's a great opportunity for someone to get into. And being new or not having a lot of sales volume or not having a lot of knowledge in real estate, there are a lot of legal implications.
There are.
Right?
I'm here to tell you.
Sure. Well, tell us, as the broker,
Yep.
you are responsible for the work of every single realtor in your brokerage, and you're liable.
Correct. That's correct. I have all the liability of every action that a real estate agents in my company take.
Yeah. So we have a handy dandy list of all of the top things that you're seeing a salesman in the profession come across that may be cause for a dispute, escrow dispute, a lawsuit, a FREC involvement,
FREC complaint,
complaint, or a lot of other things. So let's dive right in. Any particular order to these, or did you just pick up the top ones?
Well, I call this little segment that I do for the agents in my real estate office the broker blues. And every month I share with them, the issues that we've seen pop up over and over again to try to help them insulate themselves from making the same mistakes. I'll tell you that most of the issues we're going to talk about today are not things that an agent intentionally set out to do. It is really a mistake that they made. Okay. I rarely, the whole time I've been the broker of these franchises, and we have 600 agents now and 3 franchises, I have only ran into a couple of times when an agent intentionally did something out of line.
Knowingly misled.
Yep.
Knowingly did something fraudulent or whatever. Most times it's an error or omission.
It's an accident. Yep.
Yeah.
It really is. And so I think if we bring these issues forward, we can maybe help people, from making those mistakes. So here, the first one that we're going to start off with.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the number one errors and omissions claim in the real estate industry.
Wow. And if you would have told me, if you would have said to me, Ronnie, what do you think is number one? I would never have picked this one.
Yep.
I would never have thought that this is the number one claim, right?
Yep, it sure is.
We were probably wondering what that claim is. And that claim is the licensee stating that it is a septic and not a sewer, or a sewer and not a septic. They misspoke, and that's the error.
That is the error.
Wow.
And usually the problem is that a person is expecting, a home buyer is expecting that they bought a home that's on a sewer system. And so what happens is during that inspection period, because they assumed they were on a sewer system, they didn't have a septic inspection.
That's right.
And so there was no opportunity for them to determine the condition of that septic tank, drain field, all of that. And when a new family moves into a home and starts using the home differently, that's typically when breakdowns happen. And that's what happens with the septic system. You may have a very small family that lived in that home, maybe even a single person.
Yeah.
And now a family of 4 moves in, and they start using the septic system differently.
That puts a lot of strain on the system, and then they say, hey, why aren't our toilets flushing right?
Yeah.
Boom.
Or why is it backing up? Even worse, in the shower.
Yeah.
And so what has happened is the drain field typically has failed.
And listen, we're talking about the buyer's due diligence period.
Yep.
Of their inspection protection. And let's just say, for example, the as-is contract, let's say, they have an inspection protection.
Yep.
They have, let's just say, just for easy numbers, the agent put 10 days inspection. They didn't know it had a septic, or were misled, or whatever the case is, and they didn't have their inspection.
Correct.
They weren't able to deny the home based on that septic report.
That's correct.
And we're talking about in cases sometimes that it may be end of life. You have to have a pump out because, when you inspect it, it has to be pumped out.
Correct.
And this is costly.
Oh, very costly. And most of the time in these cases, what happens is it's misrepresented in the MLS. So somebody a listing agent has put into the MLS that the property is on a sewer system when in fact it's on a septic system.
Are you telling me that the MLS instructions are not always 100% accurate?
No, yeah, I'm telling you that. Yeah.
Wow, what a surprise!
I'm telling you that.
Yeah, if you're a new agent, you don't always assume, because a lot of people don't always assume that information is accurate, because that's simply just a listing agent putting information into the system.
Well, and I'll tell you, in one instance that I had to handle, we had a listing agent who had a home listed in the same community, and just made the assumption, because that home had been on a sewer system, that all the homes in that subdivision or in that community were on a sewer system. And in fact, that's not true. What had happened is when the septic system started failing in that community, the city or county forced the homeowner to then hook up to the county sewer system that had been brought in later on, long after those homes were built.
Got it.
And they would not issue permits for new septic tanks or drain fields. And so you were forced then to hook up. A lot of the counties and cities in our area want to get rid of septic tanks because of the leakage that happens, and then that sewage gets into the lakes and streams. And
other technology that is a little more efficient for cities.
Yeah.
Great. So that's one of them. And it always surprises me that would be the number one. I would think it would be something different, but that's interesting. That's sewer versus septic. So to avoid this, we want to ask the homeowners if they know what they're on.
Yep.
We want to maybe get a utility bill verified with the utilities department, if it is one versus the other.
Correct.
And if I'm a listing agent, I want to ask them, oh, you're on septic? Great. Let's go further. When was the last time that you checked it, that it was pumped, that you did that kind of stuff?
Well, and when I first started handling this issue, someone told me the seller said that they were on the sewer system, public sewer, and they took their word for it. And the homeowner actually, during the complaint and the investigation, was truly unaware that they had a septic tank.
They had no idea.
I know that may sound ridiculous, but in actuality, there's just a lot of people that if they've never had to have their system repaired, if it's always just worked, they don't question it, and so they really did not know that they were on a septic system. It happens.
100%.
It happens.
Well,
so
great.
That's why I always say, the quickest way to figure this out is ask for the utility bill. If you only see charges for electric and water but no sewer, you know that you want to dig on that a little bit more, because there should always be a charge for sewer. Water and sewer are billed at different rates, but there is always a charge for water in and water out. So that's what you need to really investigate. You can also ask your title company to run a utilities lien search, and they can help you. They can help you with that for verification if there's any doubt.
Got it. Very cool. So that's the number one. Let's move on to number two. And this is something that, and I when you say it's a mistake, when we open this conversation, I can definitely see this mistake happening.
Yep.
Because we as realtors, we want to be as helpful as possible. We want to make it a smooth transaction. We're thinking about customer service. Oh, let me handle that for you. Let me help you with this. Let me help you with that. But we don't realize the liability that there may be involved with that action.
That's a great word that you just used, and it's true. What happens here when you do...
And by the way, this one is recommending a home inspector.
Correct.
Recommending a home inspector. So when I say that, if your light bulb's going off, you may be in this kind of situation.
And liability is exactly what you step into when you recommend just one home inspector. And encourage the buyer to use that one.
But Denise, how do I get over all these alarmist home inspectors are going to tank my deal? Can't I just recommend the guy that I always use? What's the problem there?
Well, the problem there is if the guy you always use is always great, every one of us is capable of making a mistake. And the day the home inspector makes a mistake and somebody sues you, and you've recommended that home inspector exclusively, you're going to be right in the line of fire of that liability. So there's nothing that says you can't help people make good decisions.
That's right.
And so that's why I always recommend that you give at least 3 choices to the buyer, and then encourage that buyer to do the research. Do the research themselves, not you do the research and give it to them. Anybody can figure anything out on the internet these days, right? There's Google reviews, there's
map search. Yep.
Yeah, there's everything that you can look up to see about the proficiency of someone's business. So you can help them with 3 names. You can tell them this is who I've had experiences with in the past, but don't try to lean them into saying, and this guy right here is my favorite one. Don't do that kind of thing. Let them choose and let them do the research on who they want to use.
I'll tell you just a personal story that, in my previous job, I was working in the compliance and brokerage management, and I talked to a lot of agents, and I came across this case where the buyer was very happy with everything and the agent. The agent helped her book the inspection. The agent gave her the link for the payment, everything, and what we're talking about here, just to be helpful.
Yeah.
The buyer had that inspector inspect the home. The inspector missed something that it was very easy to miss because you can't see through drywall.
Sure.
Well, long story short, they close. A week later, they have a leak in the home, a massive drywall leak. They had to replace the drywall. And it wasn't even the client. It was the insurance company. Said, well, how did you have the home inspected? Who picked the inspector? They kind of brought up some of these questions.
Gotcha.
And the client's kind of feeling was that the agent had led her to use this guy, and are you guys in cahoots? Did you make me buy this defective house? You led me to that inspector. When it was 100% innocent. It wasn't like that at all. But from the client's point of view, she may have felt misled.
Right, exactly.
And that's what we want to avoid when it comes to liability and your reputation.
Well, and when a buyer who's just purchased a home has to incur expenses, they're going to look for someone to blame for those those expenses. And if you're connected with that home inspector, that's going to be you.
Yeah.
Because of the way that our society works, anybody who has what's called errors and omissions insurance, and we have that as a brokerage, attorneys will encourage people to sue and get coverage from that E&O insurance. So the farther you can keep yourself away from having anything to do with choosing the home inspector, the better off you are.
100%.
Yeah.
One good point that you have on here that a lot of new agents might not know, that inspection is, even though you were emailed it by the inspector or by the client, it's not your property.
That's correct.
So you need to ask before transmitting that inspection to any party.
That's correct.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So that inspection has been paid for by the buyer and is the buyer's property. So before you go emailing it all over creation, you need to make sure that your buyer is okay with sharing that information, and never send it without permission from the buyer. And you need documented permission.
Yeah. Email.
Have them send you an email that says, "Hey, look, I'm fine with you sending it to the listing agent, who will then share it with the seller." Because it's my property, and until I give you that permission, you should not take that liberty.
And that happens.
All the time.
Sometimes you want
the
the seller to see the inspection so you can negotiate repairs, whatever the case is, right? That happens.
That happens.
We're not saying, what we're saying is get permission.
That's right.
Right.
Once you have permission, then you're in the clear.
And what's the damage, what's the harm of sharing that with the lender?
So sometimes small items on a list of repairs may throw up red flags to a lender, and so it could affect them processing the loan and continuing without getting some complications there. So the lender is really not privy to the home inspection and should not be ever given a copy of it.
Got it. Very good.
Now, a wind mitigation and that kind of thing is a different type of inspection that like insurance companies may ask for. That's different than just taking the whole home inspection,
the entire thing,
and shipping it to wherever you want.
100%. So like we said, just to recap, we want to give the buyer choices.
Correct.
We don't want to schedule for them.
Try not to.
Yep. We want to be helpful, but not, incur any kind of additional liability. We want to have permission before we transmit that inspection, and that sort of thing. So
and documented.
And document. Very good. All right, let's move on right through. This is a big one. And by the way, I'm just seeing these now, so I'm excited, kind of surprised at some of these. I love it. And this is a big one, and I'll say, especially during the pandemic COVID times.
Yes, sir.
I had virtual clients buying from New York. I had people buying from California. People never even seen the property. And this one is the buyer's final walkthrough. Okay, tell us about the buyer's final walkthrough.
Well, so you can see when I put this slide together, I said, do not ever conduct a walkthrough for a buyer, never. And the same.
I think you put it all. It's in all caps. Never all caps.
Now we all know the realities of this chaotic market that we just came out of, and there were a lot of agents in my class that were like, "Oh, I've done that numerous times." Well, just because you did it doesn't mean maybe you should have done it. You need to understand the liability that you accept when you do a buyer's final walkthrough. And so if the buyer cannot be present in a walkthrough, your second course of action should have them send a representative of their choice, like a friend, family member. I say anybody but you. So many people were buying houses that were outside of the area, during the last couple of years.
Or even sight unseen.
And so agents would go in there and try to conduct the walkthrough with, filming it on the iPad and all that kind of stuff. And that's great. But what happens is if you miss anything, even the smallest thing now becomes your fault.
Yeah.
You missed it. And so when we had one, I'll just give you an example. The agent did a great job of doing the virtual walkthrough with the iPad, taking great photographs, showed everything, but he did not step inside of a closet and look up where there was clearly like a drywall leak.
How dare this agent not cover every single part of that's definitely his fault.
A few days later, the person from out of state arrives with their moving truck, starts to move in, notices the big stain on the drywall in the master bedroom closet, and there is a plumbing leak that is pretty pretty big. And at this point now it's ruined some drywall. And so it's more complicated. And so guess whose finger points immediately to the agent?
The buyer.
The buyer now has expenses that they did not expect. And even though this agent did a fabulous job for him, the whole transaction was great and smooth and wonderful. But when people come down to having to take money out of their pocket, they're going to look to you and say, you missed this. So now
That's right.
I want you
That's
to
on
pay
you.
for it.
And let me tell you one more thing, that just always comes to mind in here. I love to read the contract. The buyer's final walkthrough is actually contractual.
It is.
There is a part right above the inspection contingency, the inspection paragraph, that says that there is a buyer final walkthrough. It's called the buyer's reinspection of property. It's up to 1 day prior, if left blank, 1 day prior to the closing.
Right.
And that is a contractual right that the buyer has. And in there, with that part of the contract and the as-is contract, there's the as-is repair contingency, which means that the purpose of that walkthrough is for the agent and the buyer, the buyer, guided by the agent, to be walked through the property, and if they see any damages that the seller has allowed to happen during their inspection, during their period, not even that, during the contract period, that seller is responsible to repair those issues that were okay when he went under contract, but are now damages.
Correct.
So like a broken window in the back, right? The window was fine. 5 days before closing, it breaks. Now we're walking through the house, and we notice it. That's what it's for.
Correct.
And so that's a big thing. That's a big protection for your buyer that you're just waiving, or you're just letting it go if you don't do it properly.
That's right. And, a lot of people were closing, doing mail-aways, and they weren't actually here for their closing. And that's why they started to depend on the agent, to do that walkthrough. But again, just because you do it doesn't make it the smartest thing to do.
And I believe there's a form already out there from FAR that is a waiver.
It is. And if you don't have that signed, you've assumed all that liability with no protection. Yeah. That waiver will protect you from them coming back and saying, you missed this.
And we'll say, hey, listen, you signed that you weren't going to have it. So that actually protects you. So any final thoughts on buyer's walkthrough?
If they refuse to do a walkthrough or they can't make it, definitely you always want to document that. The more documentation you have, if you ever have to defend yourself, you can prove that I advised the buyer that a walkthrough was important. I advised them that they should do it, and they were either unable or unwilling to do it, but that was their choice. You can also have your home inspector do a walkthrough for your buyer, and then they'll do a re-inspect of the property for a small fee.
Very good.
If you can't find anybody else to do it, that's the person I would put that responsibility on.
Very good. Excellent. This next one is one that we are all told about in real estate school.
Okay.
And we're all told about on our continuing education. And sometimes if you're an agent, you never see this happen, but it is a big deal for the broker and for FREC as well. And that's escrow disputes.
Yeah, and I'm always surprised, Ronnie, at how many agents really do not know how escrow disputes work.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a very distinct policy. There's no, wiggle room in it. It happens the way it happens.
When you're in broker school, as you know, and that's I think I would say 45% of the material on the test and in the school is escrow disputes and legal stuff and broker stuff. But I actually learned so much about escrow disputes from a couple of attorneys and from that class that it is not gray. It is black and white. The law is. Yep. And then sometimes people make it gray. People make it emotional. They make it weird. But the law is very clear on what has to happen with those disputes.
That's correct.
So we're not the police.
Yeah.
Escrow disputes are civil matters.
Yep. Escrow disputes are a civil matter, and there's two ways that escrow is held. One way is for a brokerage to hold escrow. And if a broker holds escrow, of course, we have to have a great deal of accounting that goes with that. And so a lot of brokers now opt out of holding escrow. And so we then, the majority, I think, of transactions hold escrow actually at title companies.
Okay.
And that leaves the broker out of having to have any accounting to do with those escrow accounts.
Yes.
It's very complicated. It's a big FREC risk. And so the farther a brokerage can kind of stay away from that, the less complicated it is for us.
And our policy at Heritage, the policy at Heritage is no, we don't hold escrow.
That's correct.
And for any real estate agents out there that are contract nerds, that would be page 1 of the FARBAR as is contract. It has who is going to be that first paragraph is not always, people mistake that. I think that's where you put title company. No, that's the escrow officer.
That's the escrow
That's who's going to be holding that very large thousands of dollars deposit.
Correct.
And that is different than the title agent. But that typically sometimes is the same person, but that is actually who that first page is for.
That's correct.
And as an agent, am I allowed to advise my client, hey, if you do that, you may lose your deposit?
Well, I think an agent should educate the client as to how escrow money works, because it's not 100% given that if there's an escrow dispute that we're going to be able to get that money back for that buyer in a timely manner, because it's going to have to go through the process. If the two parties can't come to some kind of agreement, it's going to have to go through the process in order to settle the escrow dispute, which is usually able to be solved as long as the deposit is a smaller deposit under $8,000. It can be settled in small claims court. If it's over that, it's settled still in court, but not small claims. It's in civil court. And we have to go through and follow that policy. In order to release escrow, every title company must have both parties in agreement, they must sign as to how the release is going to be handled. Sometimes, even though a seller is not entitled to an escrow deposit, and we can show them everywhere in the contract where the buyer has their legal right to have that money back, if they don't sign that release, the title company's hands are tied. That's a statute from the state of Florida.
That's right. Even if everyone knows, and everyone can see it in the contract that, hey, you have a 10-day inspection period where the buyer can out of their own sole decision-making can back out. That seller goes, no, the contract is there. That's a dumb reason. I fixed that drywall. They have to buy the house. Well, sir, they're not going to buy the house, and this is why, and they have to buy it. Even if they're wrong, you've tied up that deposit now tied up for a certain number of days.
That's right. And a lot of times when sellers do that, it's been maybe a difficult negotiation, on the contract, and there's a lot of emotions, running high. And then they go through the inspection period. They have every right to back out. They're within their time frame, and the seller is just so emotionally charged that it's almost like a revenge. I'm not going to release your money. I just want to jam you up for a while. The other one is the financing period. We see and we can define and we can all look at the financing period and when it comes to an end. And if the buyer hasn't been able to secure their financing in that financing period and the lender turns them down, they have every right, according to the contract, to have their deposit refunded to them, correct?
That's right, yep.
However,
Paragraph 8B of the FARBAR as is contract.
Oh, wow, I don't even know the paragraphs. You got a good one on me there. But no matter if we can prove that and we all look at it and we all agree and the seller says, nope, I'm not releasing the money. I'm mad. I'm angry about this.
When you did your homework on this, when you saw the cases, you put in here, you told me earlier, most escrow disputes are emotional. They're not sometimes based on actual facts of the case.
Rarely.
Yeah. That was very interesting to me to read that. And sometimes as an agent, what I do honestly in my practice and what I teach new agents is at the beginning, I like to have important dates and deadlines email that goes out to all parties so that we are on the same page up front and we're not disagreeing on the date of the final date of the period.
Right.
So sometimes I do that up front, and if they say, oh, no, that's wrong, we can talk about it.
Right.
And I think that helps a lot in disputes. I think communication with title company and the lender on both as a listing agent and as a buyer's agent will help in kind of alleviating and not getting that far into dispute.
That's correct.
not getting things into a dispute at all.
Correct.
So,
yeah.
Excellent.
So sometimes a couple of things that you can do is try to place the smallest deposit possible. In the market that we were in, there were such ridiculous escrow deposits made that it was enticing for the seller to think they could capture that money, right? So in the market that we're in now, we're a little more balanced. We could go back to an old practice that we used to have, which was take a small deposit up front, and then after inspections, which are usually what can blow a contract up, then get the full deposit after the inspection period.
And what a great tool that is. And it isn't even like it's not already part of the first page of the contract.
Yeah.
The first page of the contract literally says initial deposit, and then a couple lines down it says additional deposit. So that's a really good tool. A lot of people don't use it.
Yep.
And it's a good way to protect your buyers and minimize their escrow risk. And it's a good way to entice that seller by saying, hey, after inspections are complete, we're going to go ahead and give more money. That might get them more on the same page to continue without doing repairs or having repairs that make sense for them.
That's right. Yeah.
Very good.
I agree with that.
All right. Kind of on the same escrow vein. This is a good one too, because there's a misconception. Maybe you can clear it up for us.
Okay.
I'm not under contract until I give the deposit. That's something I've heard a lot. And this next one is the escrow deposit process.
Right.
What would you say to those people that have signed a legally binding contract,
Right.
but they haven't given a deposit and they go, no, we're not under contract? What are your thoughts?
Well, you are under contract, but the problem with that is that there's no penalties if the buyer were to walk away. So you have a contract, but it's not valid until that escrow deposit is placed, because there's no consequences if the buyer just walks away. So they have 3 days to place the escrow deposit, and if they don't meet that, then the seller doesn't have to continue with holding his property or her property off the market.
That's right.
They can just automatically, without any other notice from them or anything like that, put that property back on the market because the buyer breached the contract.
That's
and
right.
did not put that deposit down.
And the contract is a term. Sorry, the deposit is a term of the contract.
Correct.
Within a certain number of days, I will give this money.
That's
right. And that money, as we said before, is given to the title company or whoever the escrow agent is. In most cases, title company, and they will many times be sending out as well the instructions for submitting a deposit.
That's right.
Right. So tell us, what are some of the key things you've seen that is an issue in the deposit process?
Well, the deposit, we do have fraud to worry about, and now with how we wire transfer money and things like that, we should have an awareness of having the buyer talk directly to the title company. Don't get in it in the middle of it yourself. Because that's where the fraudulent emails and whatnot advising the buyer to put it in the wrong account come from.
Or saying, hey, this is, and they get really savvy, these fraudsters, fraudulent people, hackers or whatever, they get really savvy. They may even know the buyer's names. They even may know my name. They may know the title company name. And they'll say, hey, John, we had a problem with our escrow account. Can you wire the funds to this account at first whatever title, and here's the account number.
That's right.
And the emails look real.
Well, and what usually hindsight, when you go back and see how this happened, you will see that there may be one character off in that email address, but that's it. And so everybody's in a hurry. Nobody looks at it under a microscope, right? They just, oh gosh, there's a change. Let me get this done. And before you know it, that money is wired to the wrong bank account and it disappears.
That's right. And there's, I'm not 100% sure, but I know that under a certain amount, it's not like a felony, or the federal government doesn't really get involved that much. But over a certain amount, the federal government does get involved, and people were going right under that amount.
That's right. That's right. Well, we've had, unfortunately, several cases of fraud and wire transferring, and the FBI basically told us that if it's not over $10,000, it's not even going to get on their radar screen.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Yeah. And so I think as an agent, I've always made it my practice to tell the client, hey, congrats on the contract. We're good to go. Here's the dates. Please reach out to title to confirm how they would want the deposit wired, and be aware that you'll never get deposit information from me. I always say that. You'll never get anything from me to you about a change in deposit or wiring. It's always going to come from the title company. And before I do anything, I'm going to want to call them.
Yeah, I would say that if they get any kind of notice that the instructions from the title company are changing, the first thing they should do is pick up the telephone and call the title company. Because listen, once you get those wiring instructions, why would they change? You know, the consumer doesn't know that. We know that, but the consumer doesn't know that it's highly unlikely that there would ever be a change in wiring.
You just shut down your whole bank account? Yeah. Absolutely. So that's a good one. That's a good tip for all of our new agents. Anything else on that one?
Well, probably the one thing I would say is this. By the time a escrow deposit dispute gets through the court system, there are so many court fees and legal costs and whatnot that are involved in doing that the deposit that might have been $10,000 is now $5,000. I mean, it really eats up that money.
Yeah.
So we really do try to encourage buyers and sellers to come to some kind of agreement if we possibly can. And so if you have a seller that may be very emotional about the getting the deposit or being angry about the deal falling apart, it's best to try to counsel them that if that money is really due back to that buyer, chasing it through the court system is going to be costly and time consuming. And it's better to come to an agreement than to keep trying to try to chase that money. Very
good. Yeah, I agree 100%. Let's talk about this next one, and it's happening increasingly as, this is a side note, by the way, as we, the professionals, lose track of our job and our duties and good practice. I, as an agent, want to be that consumer's number one pick for realtor. I want to be showing property to that person. I want them to feel comfortable that they've chosen me as a professional. But as there are so many realtors and so many things, and sometimes who showed the house, who wrote the contract, no buyer loyalty out there, if you're thinking that. And that's procuring clause.
That is procuring clause.
Who affected the sale, who did all the right things to get that sale. And correct me if I'm wrong, procuring clause in this case, we're not talking about a buyer or necessarily. We're talking more on who's owed commissions on the seller side.
Or the buyer
right?
side.
Or the buyer side, depending on who's paying commissions, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about procuring clause and what you've seen.
So procuring clause is when another agent steps in between you and your client after you can prove continuous uninterrupted contact that can be documented, and they step in front of that relationship and kind of snatch that client out from under you, okay? The best way to prevent this, or to, let's say have a strong defense, is have a buyer-broker agreement signed with every buyer that you're working with. Buyers are typically the ones that wander, okay? Let's just take a scenario. We all are working with more than one client. You've been working with a buyer, showing them dozens of houses, following up with them, taking care of them as a good real estate professional. And on a Sunday afternoon, they roll up on a house that they see a sign for, they love it, and they want to see it right now.
Yeah.
They give you a call, and you're not available right now. You might be with another client, you might be in an open house, whatever you're doing. And so they call the agent on the sign, and the agent shows up to show them the house, writes the contract, and now where are you? Okay, that's how a lot of times this happens. So if you have a buyer-broker agreement, we can show that to the professional on the other side. If you educate your buyers and let them know, if you involve another real estate agent, there could be a likely scenario where I can't be your representative anymore. And we all know that writing the contract is just the first step of the real estate
I was going to say that,
transaction.
we know that, and that is a good point, because it isn't, hey, I'm not getting paid. No, it's like, hey, I'm not involved at all. You can't call me to help you. You can't call me for this. You can't call me. I'm not involved at all.
That's right.
Not because I don't want to, kind of, but because legally the relationship is now with that other person as a transaction broker.
That's correct.
Not with me. I'm nowhere. I'm not legally involved in this. And if I give advice, it's not going to be out of my scope, right?
That's right.
100%. And I've always, and we know that the contract on page 12 does have a spot that says buyer's agent and listing agent. That's really important to note that the contract does have that.
Yes.
But that may not be enough sometimes, right?
It may not be enough, but I think we go back to saying, let's educate buyers on how this works, because listen, you and I are in this business. We know everything about how it works, right? But if I'm not doing this every day for a living, I may not understand that if I go see a property with another agent and then I let's say I even like that property, I don't write a contract right then with the other agent, but I call you and say I want to write a contract on it, there's a possibility that that agent could cut you out of that deal.
Yeah.
Because you didn't show that house to those
Yeah.
people. He did or she did.
That's right.
And but showing a house is also not the only element of procuring cause.
That's right.
You have to show that you had uninterrupted communication and contact that can be documented. Because there are some agents too that orphan their clients.
That's right.
They show them a few houses, things didn't work out, they stop following up with them for 3-4 months. That all of a sudden that buyer writes a contract with another agent and they come in and try to claim procuring cause. That's not going to be a valid procuring cause.
And listen, is the consumer allowed to fire you for bad customer service?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It happens all the time.
The problem is a lot of them don't give you notice.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
So if you use a buyer broker agreement, I know that's a little scary. People don't like to do it, but it says very clearly in there. If you are not satisfied with the way that our business relationship is going, all it takes is one notice to me that I am no longer needed and we can terminate this contract. I hope that never happens to you, but look, if occasionally you're not going to get along or jive with somebody and they want to terminate you, at least you stop your efforts.
That's right.
In trying to help them. And they're not out there running around with another agent. You're not even aware of it. You're still researching homes for them. You're spending your time on that, and you're unaware. So have this conversation with your buyers about how this works, because showing the house, like we say, is this much of the transaction. All of the other things that you're going to do.
That's the easy part, right?
Yeah. And you being involved as the person they selected to be their home buying consultant is going to go away if they get involved with a different agent.
Correct.
And they don't know who they're choosing. So rather than subject themselves to that, educate them on how this works and have them understand that you need to be involved. Give them 10 of your business cards and tell them, if you ever go into a new homes community, if you ever go into an open house where there's another agent and you like that house, here's my agent's card. That way we've put that agent on notice. I have representation.
100%. Yeah. I think to avoid this, you're going to have consistent follow-up. You're going to have kind of, you're there at the showings. But like you said, life gets in the way and they want to see the house right now, but I'm at my son's baseball game. I can't make it.
Yeah.
Right? So life does get in the way, and that's why I think the buyer-broker agreement is good. Now, let me tell you this. What would you say to agents that are newer, don't have the confidence to pitch that buyer-broker agreement? How would you kind of advise them to pitch that, to talk about their client with that?
Well, I would say to come to some training classes.
There we go.
We will teach you how to do that.
Yeah.
Buyer-broker agreements, really, I think we overthink them in our mind. They're not binding to the point where they can't be canceled. They can't. The buyer can, like we said, fully dismiss an agent, even if they've signed a buyer-broker agreement with just notice. So understand what the document really says. It just says to the buyer, I'm doing these things for you as exclusively, and I need your exclusive loyalty unless there's bad job performance, and then we can separate.
Yeah.
But it does kind of give them an idea of all of the work that an agent does, behind the scenes and in preparation for being their consultant. And it really does, I think, make a good relationship between buyer and agent when they sign these things. 100%.
And the way that I pitch it, the way that I kind of bring it up to my buyers is during the buyer consultation.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm constantly wanting to meet that buyer in person, maybe for a cup of coffee, maybe we meet at the house, whatever the case is, during our tour of the community, maybe. So let me show you around downtown Altamont Springs, and you can kind of see the place that you're going to buy a house at. And we sit down for coffee and we have a consultation.
Yep.
Right? And I'm going to say, hey, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but I've been in the game this many years. I have this many experience. I have these listings and I want to work for you.
Right.
And what that means is that I'm going to give you these things. And in return, all I ask is that you're loyal to me and let me be your professional. How does that sound?
Yep.
Great. Well, listen, here's that form if you don't mind. Whatever the case is, I'm going to shoot it to your email. And that's how I play the game. You know, I kind of let them know what I'm going to do for them. And now they have expectations. And let me ask you this. Do you think most agents they've met have done that?
No, I do not. I think buyer's brokers agreements are not used very often. And that's why we find ourselves in front of the board of realtors so often in procuring cause issues. If we had those lined up a little better, I think we'd reduce the amount of these arguments.
So I wonder if those buyers, when you do this action and have them for a consultation and talk to them, they're what? Wow, this guy's a professional. This guy's looking out for me. This is more of a legitimate relationship. Yeah.
Well, and you know, the resources that an agent brings to the table go far beyond just, you know, finding a house.
Opening a door.
Yeah.
That's what we think, right?
And also, what about sometimes you're privy to houses that are coming on the market and maybe they get in there first because you know about things. You know, that's another benefit from being having a representative knows exactly what you're looking for. They get wind of a house that's coming on the market that meets those needs, and maybe they get a sneak peek and get in there before anybody else. So they need to understand that you bring a lot more to the table than just opening doors for them. Think of all the vendors that you are able to you know, recommend to them. Think of the ability, your negotiating skills, the way you can get contracts through for them. They need to understand that that's a big part of it.
Yeah, not just opening doors.
Yeah.
And on the
easy part.
And I would say on the agent side, you don't get paid to open doors.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, you're a salesman. That's a big piece of our job too. So, hey, it's been great chatting with you about these things, these topics and other topics, you know.
Well,
and
thanks.
What would be some parting words that you would give along these lines, talking about compliance and the contract and minimizing your risk? Any final words you would give to a newer agent or someone here at the Heritage Group?
So if you're newer to real estate, what I would say to you is practice writing contracts. Write a contract on your own home. You know, submit it to your team leader for their review. Or we have a compliance director here named Barb Stone. Barb will look over your contract, or your team leader will, and they'll mark it up, maybe your mentor, and they'll say, this was right, this was wrong, you know, and get really proficient at understanding what that sales contract means. And so once you do, I call it knowing your craft. You know, you are in this and you have a certain responsibility to people to know exactly what you're doing. So know that contract in and out and study it. The other thing that I would say is I see most of these problems that come up because people made hasty decisions. They wanted to work too fast through things that are very complicated, and things got missed. So I would say to you, slow down, review your documents, not once, not twice, maybe 3 times, and make sure you have everything right. Don't try to be getting through these complicated transactions in 15 minutes. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I would say when in doubt, ask.
Correct.
Because, as realtors, we get paid quite a bit of money. We all can agree with that.
Yes, we can.
But we also have a lot of duty to our clients. We have a lot of our reputation as well. And we're professionals. You know, we're Florida state licensees, just like a doctor is and a nurse is. And we have continuing education as well.
That's right.
So I would say that in our profession, we can be sued for being bad at our job.
Yeah,
that's 100% true. You can be sued for negligence.
And this is, as we always tell everybody, this is the biggest purchase that most consumers will make, is the purchase of a home.
A $500,000 house, yeah, for sure. You know?
And it's serious, and it has implications that, you know, if you don't do it correctly, somebody's going to get hurt financially because you were neglectful of your duties.
Yeah,
so.
I hold that escrow stewardship piece, you know, in my mind always, because as you work with buyers, and you've worked with a lot of buyers and sellers, sometimes that deposit is the most amount of money people have saved. You know, to us, it's a deal. I'm going to get paid in a month and a half. But to them, it's their entire life savings. To them, it's their entire livelihood. They've saved through thick and thin, and they've changed jobs, and this is their life.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, wow, what an honor that I'm the one that gets to steward that and to walk them through the process.
Right.
It's a big deal.
It is.
So I think if you're a new agent, have some pride in that and really, like Denise said, hone your craft, learn from the more experienced agents who've done a lot of deals, mentor, team leader, brokers. So I think that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, and you have so much support here in the Heritage office. There's no reason that if you have a question, a doubt, or you just want a second pair of eyes on something, that you have all of those resources that you can use so that you make sure that what you're doing is on track.
Solid. Well, thank you for time. You're very busy.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for your time. I think a lot of our newer agents are going to love this video.
Oh, I hope
it's going to give them a lot of things to think about. And we'll do more of these also for everyone. But thank you so much. And
you're welcome, Ronnie.
We will see you on the next one.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks, guys.